Fox News anchor Gretchen Carlson and also Barry Levine, author of The Spider, Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ryan, DOJ just asking a federal judge to make this public, this grand jury testimony in the Epstein case. When, and if this judge releases this, will the public learn anything potentially useful?
So it's first an uphill battle to get a judge to release grand jury materials, especially because this doesn't really fit any of the statutory or regulatory reasons that a court would do that. The court would have to find that it has inherent powers. Very unusual. And then at the end of the day, I don't think it's the material that the public really wants. The public wants to know what other individuals were involved in sexual abuse of minors. It's probably not in these grand jury materials. The grand jury indictments, in fact, are very limited to Maxwell and Epstein's abuse of minors and do not mention other individuals. So there's every likelihood with those narrow indictments, they weren't even presented with that. I think the real material that the public wants is in the DOJ's offices. It's not what was presented to the grand jury.
Yeah, I see Gretchen and Barry, both of you nodding to that. So, Barry, talk about some of that other information that would not be contained in grand jury testimony.
Of course, Brianna. The transparency is really what all of us want here. And there's over 100,000 pages of documents, of FBI files. And of course, as he was just saying, the grand jury testimony is really limited to what the indictment said was the period of time from 2002 to 2005 when Epstein abused women in Palm Beach at his mansion there and in New York. We're looking for the complete transparency of all the files so we can learn about the interviews that have been conducted over the years by the FBI. We can learn the details of the autopsy report after Jeffrey Epstein's death behind bars. I'm particularly interested in his primary accuser, Virginia Giuffre. She had named six or seven prominent individuals who she said she had been trafficked to. Did the FBI try to corroborate any evidence related to these men? Are there interviews with any of these men? Are there interviews with any associates? There has to be a great deal of information in those files that could help us understand the 2 decades of sexual abuse of more than 1,000 victims.
Gretchen, whatever is released, I mean, you would expect a lot would be redacted, from victims' names to accusers' names to people who may have been accused, but nothing at this point is founded, right? I mean, you can't just put the names out there in these legal filings of people accused, but it's not a found. It's not, you know, if it's potentially baseless, there's a problem there. So how is the part of Donald Trump's base that really wants to see this information going to be placated by seeing this stuff?
Yeah, you know, I think that this raises a really important question about whether or not Trump putting out another potential fake news story is going to actually gin up the base again. You know, Trump doesn't strategize about many things, but we saw this happening earlier this week. We know the Wall Street Journal reached out to him on Tuesday. By Wednesday, he was saying it was a hoax and that this was all up to the Democrats. So he was already preparing his base to not believe the story that was going to come out in the Wall Street Journal. Then you add into it that the story really wasn't this massive expose that some people were talking about. And so now you've had some of his influencers, like Laura Loomer, who has a lot of power, saying that it's fake news. So I tend to believe that this will work to coalesce the MAGA base to come back behind Trump. The interesting twist here could be if the judge denies the release of this grand jury information, then the base is going to say, why is Donald Trump and why is Pam Bondi not releasing the millions of other documents that they could release right now? So I think there's still a lot to be seen about what's going to happen, but I think the Wall Street Journal story has probably coalesced the MAGA base behind Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit because, Ryan, this lawsuit that Trump just filed against the Journal and Robert Murdoch, is it a smart filing by Trump then?
I'm not so sure it is, especially because when the Wall Street Journal reported the story last night, they said that they were already told by Trump's side that the Trump side was threatening to sue the Journal. So one would expect that the Journal did all of its homework before publishing. So that's just at least an assumption I'm working with thinking about this case. And then it could seriously backfire. It could backfire in so many different ways. It could backfire because the Journal might be shown to have done its homework. The actual the image could come forward, which apparently has, according to the Journal, Donald Trump's signature, which should be pretty hard corroboration for somebody to try to avoid that. And on the other hand, Donald Trump, as Evan said, might very well himself be deposed about the events that would corroborate whether or not this was, in fact, a truthful event as to what occurred and what was submitted under his name to the Epstein birthday album.
Gretchen, Trump has made a lot of threats to sue. He's filed a lot of lawsuits. Let's listen to that.
I'm suing them for doing that.
I'm suing the country over it.
We will be suing in Nevada.
Well, I'm suing Pulitzer. You don't know this.
We're filing one on 60 Minutes. I should be suing her for defamation. I actually told my lawyers, I said, sue him anyway.
But not a lot of people might have guessed, Gretchen, that he'd do it to Rupert Murdoch. You worked, of course, for a Murdoch-owned outlet for a long time. You sued Fox. You said Murdoch fostered a culture of misogyny, toxicity. Are you surprised that Trump did this? And how do you think Murdoch might react?
Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, up until a few hours ago, I would have told you that I didn't think he was going to do this. But, he's been successful with ABC and CBS and bribing law firms to give him free services. So I do think that the gloves are off now. I think that this presents a conundrum for both Murdoch and for Trump. So for Murdoch, here's the situation. Trump was not Fox's pick to be the candidate in 2016. Pretty sure he also wasn't their pick this last time around. And so Murdoch, I think, likes to prove and poke Trump with his power. And we've seen the Wall Street Journal more in the second term come out against Trump. Up until now, we have not seen Fox News do the same, right? They've been avoiding this story. The card that Murdoch has is that he can tell Fox News to start covering these stories. So that's also his conundrum, because the last time that happened, all the viewers went to other outlets. So there's risk for Murdoch in that scenario. But for Trump, there's also a conundrum, because if Murdoch decides to tell Fox to start covering these stories, that's a huge risk for Trump.
From like an electronic drop-down menu, we can expect that this is a defamation lawsuit. What I think is interesting here is who is among the defendants, because in addition to suing Dow Jones and Company as an agent of the Wall Street Journal and News Corp as the parent company, he is suing obviously both of the reporters who are bylined on that report. And then there is a fifth defendant, a Keith Rupert Murdoch. And that is, I think, the epitome of the shiny object that Donald Trump is using to distract from his political misfortunes right now, Nicole.
What is the precedent for Rupert Murdoch and Dow Jones Corp and the Wall Street Journal of freelancing or running with a story about Donald Trump or anyone without having it solid?
None that I'm aware of. And particularly if you look at the reporting from the other night with a lawyer's eye, as I did, that piece of reporting was so particularly carefully worded, as if a legal department had scoured every last punctuation mark and word in it. This is not something that the Wall Street Journal took on lightly. They also say throughout the reporting that these are documents that were in the possession of the Department of Justice. And it is likely that the Wall Street Journal has more than they have revealed in its initial reporting, including potentially copies of the documents in question and or proof that the Department of Justice had it in its possession as part of the Epstein investigation. Nicole, will continue to look at the docket to see when the complaint itself becomes publicly available. For now, what we know, however, is that on a Friday afternoon when Trump is besieged by bad news related to Jeffrey Epstein, he has gone on the offensive to file a lawsuit against Dow Jones, News Corp, Rupert Murdoch, and two of his reporters, claiming that he was defamed by their reporting the other evening.
Just quickly, how would you defend yourself? I mean, what would Donald Trump have to prove? I mean, if this proceeds to discovery, what would the Wall Street Journal have access to in trying to defend themselves?
Well, the Wall Street Journal could obviously depose people. They could get third-party discovery, but in all likelihood, and this is, again, my belief, not based on any reporting, the Wall Street Journal already likely has evidence in its possession that this document is real and or was received by the Department of Justice as part of its 2019 investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Whether or not that document then resurfaced as part of the recent re-review that Senator Durbin talked about in his letters today to Attorney General Bondi and others is unclear. But if I'm the Wall Street Journal, truth is a defense. If this document, in fact, was in the possession of the Justice Department, if others can authenticate it, either through their testimony or through documentary evidence that was contemporary at the time, I'm going to rely on that as the Wall Street Journal, because truth is always a defense in a defamation action, Nicole.
Would Pam Bondi have a copy of the book that was put together for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday?
If you're asking me if Pam Bondi personally has it, I have no knowledge, obviously, of what Pam Bondi has in her possession or what she asked for in connection with that re-review that the Department of Justice was supposedly undertaking to try and release more of the Epstein files. Is it possible that she had access to it? Yes.
Again, this is getting really ugly for Trump. And if I was a Trump lawyer, like many have in the past, lawyers have quit on him. And they're going to quit again because, again, we've talked about all the issues. He doesn't pay them, or he says he's going to pay them and then he doesn't, or, he pays them a little bit, but then once they lose, because in most Trump cases they lose, at least a lot of the high-profile ones we've been following, then they don't get paid because they lost. Their careers get ruined. They become pariahs. Some of them get disbarred. A few of them have gotten criminal convictions. Like Michael Cohen went to jail, like literally went to like a real ass jail, like prison, right? All of this demonstrates, guys, that like this isn't working. This is going to backfire. And it's also going to backfire, guys, because what the WSJ, what the Wall Street Journal and other news sources are saying is, do you really think this was our only shot, Donald? Did you really think this is all we had? I'm not trying to downplay what they showed. I do think that's interesting. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, a 2003, like gift to Epstein really isn't the biggest deal. Trump is suing not to block that, but to block the worst stuff that's potentially coming, right? Like, we understand that, right? Because 2003, like, to be clear, one could say, for example, that the allegations against Epstein really started coming out a couple of years after 2003. That doesn't excuse Donald necessarily, but there could be plausible deniability. Like, oh, I was friends with this guy, and then I found out he was a weirdo, and I stopped hanging out with him. Like, you could hypothetically say that. But if stuff starts coming out later on, it's going to be bad. And Donald, keep this in mind. If you go through with this lawsuit, not only will people start ditching you because you're going to lose, dirt that's in your possession that you've hidden, that's going to be forced open.